Certain individuals in Colorado history have held celebrity status, with the masses following their every move. Perhaps the most famous are the Tabors, the last century's most famous love triangle. Hi, I'm John Ferrugia. The silver baron, Horace Tabor, his first wife Augusta, and the woman he left her for, Baby Doe, provide a timeless story of ambition, love, opulence, and loss. And now, Colorado experience, the Tabors.
The legend of Horace Tabor, which is inextricably tied to his first wife Augusta and his second wife Baby Doe, was a huge scandal in Colorado.
They were silver kings, rich with silver back in the 1800s.
A perfect rags to riches, back to rags story.
They bring together the threads of instant wealth and economic collapse and boom and bust and silver tycoons and love and sex and betrayal and all of the stories that make for a Colorado epic.
There's drama, there's exhilaration, there's much ostentatious, conspicuous consumption. But then there's just some very intense human misery.
Horace and Baby Doe Tabor were the Kardashians of the Gilded Age.
This program was funded by the History Colorado State Historical Fund,
supporting projects throughout the state to preserve, protect, and interpret Colorado's architectural and archaeological treasures. History Colorado State Historical Fund. Create the future, honor the past.
with support from the Denver Public Library, History Colorado, with additional funding and support from these fine organizations. And viewers like you. Thank you.
Colorado's first great age of glory was the Silver Era between the 1870s and 1893, where for about 15 years it seemed like everything was possible, where vast, unimaginable amounts of silvery wealth were flowing out of the Rocky Mountains and enriching people in Denver and throughout Colorado. And the Tabors were the epitome of the gaudy, Gilded Age silver tycoons.
Horace Tabor was originally born in Holland, Vermont in 1830. He was trained as a stone cutter.
Known as Haw to his friends, H-A-W, that was his initials, Horace Austin Warner Tabor.
And he was invited by the New England Immigrant Aid Society to homestead in Kansas as an anti-slavery advocate. But he maintained connections with New England, and for a while he worked as a stone cutter for a quarry owner in Maine, and he met and fell in love with the quarry owner's daughter, Augusta Pierce. And Horace and Augusta got married and moved to Kansas to start a homestead.
In the fall of 1857, she had a son.
And his name was Maxie.
In 1859, Horace Tabor heard of rumors of gold discoveries in what was then known as the Pikes Peak region. Horace and Augusta Tabor moved to Colorado in 1859. They were among the original pioneers.
So here he comes to Colorado looking for gold. He went to several places, Central City, Canyon City.
They moved to Oro City, which became Leadville, searching for gold.
They don't find very much gold, but there was this black dirt in the ore, and that was soon to be discovered as silver.
When he first got here, he was a miner just like everybody else, but then he found they made more money in the general store that he set up for his wife to run.
There were probably only a handful of women that participated in the 1859 gold rush. She cooked, she boarded people, she nursed people. She was described as an angel of mercy, and she and Horace made a good team. In 1863, Horace became postmaster, and their net worth was $13,000. That would be about $3.5 million of today's dollars. So they were doing well. He was a very popular, well-known, and well-liked person.
In 1877, the Tabor ship really came in. Horace Tabor loaned some mining equipment to two silver miners.
A grubstake is where the guy with the goods, the merchant, gives them to a miner with the agreement, if you find something, I get part of it, usually a percentage. And you can keep coming back for more supplies as long as you're working with me. The downside of a grubstake is if you don't find anything, you don't owe me anything. That's the part of the deal that Augusta just hated. She was constantly on Horace to quit doing this.
And the miners who Tabor had loaned equipment to found one of the richest silver mines in the Leadville vicinity, what became known as the Little Pittsburgh Mine. It was worth millions of dollars, and Horace Tabor's share of that was easily in the neighborhood of $10 million, all for a couple of burro loads of mining equipment. Not bad. In a way, though, Tabor's success was very much like winning the lottery, right? He had been gambling and speculating on something like this happening, and after 20 years, it finally did. But here's the crazy thing. Almost immediately, Tabor made a new loan to other prospectors and won the lottery again, this time with a mine that was known as the Chrysolite, that was easily as rich as the Little Pittsburgh. And if that wasn't enough, he struck it a third time with the Matchless Mine. So within 2 years, the Tabors catapulted from being a modestly successful mountain family to being the richest mining tycoons in Colorado.
Tabor, as the wealthiest man in Colorado and possibly the wealthiest man in the western United States, was very influential. And as Colorado moved from territory to statehood, he was also prominent in the politics of that time.
Horace Tabor was elected the first mayor of Leadville, and within a year of that, in 1879, he was elected the lieutenant governor of Colorado.
Just when life should have gotten more restful, more rewarding for them, things fall apart between them.
Horace, he was a dreamer. He was a speculator. He was a very hard worker, but most of his business enterprises were speculative enterprises. Prospecting is a gamble.
Was very flamboyant. He liked to spend money. He liked the company of attractive young women.
He would buy drinks for everybody. He would put on shows. And this was just, the Tabor Opera House was just a way for him to continue that lifestyle. Horace Tabor loved to entertain. He would have a bar downstairs just for his own people that would come through the doors. He had the catwalk to the Clarion next door. That was just a private way for men to move about without being seen down in the lobby.
Well, Horace and Augusta were basically two different personalities. They were the same as far as hardworking, let's become successful. He liked having all the money, and he liked gambling, and he liked being popular in town. Horace liked all the attention. Augusta really didn't care for it. It wasn't her style. She was more salt of the earth, hardworking woman.
Very quiet, very reserved. She wasn't happy with Horace's extravagant lifestyle. She didn't like to entertain.
Augusta Tabor was more disciplined in many respects, and she earned, I think unfairly, a reputation as being somewhat stingy and a penny pincher and a nag. But the truth was, somebody had to rein in Horace Tabor's impulsive speculations.
He didn't have to develop a steadier character because she had a steady character.
Well, Augusta Tabor was quite the businesswoman. She actually did all the books for Horace.
Augusta was very plain, very practical. She thought money was a tool and to be used for security.
Denver society was a conservative society, and the women who made up the highest level of Denver social elite had come up from the bottom, like the Tabors. Augusta Tabor really fit into Denver society.
They would have fights over the money, with Augusta saying, "Look, Horace, we have plenty of money now. We're rich, millions. We need to diversify. Put it into other things for long-term security." And he would always counter with, "Woman, silver is king. Silver will always be king. Nothing can change that."
Horace and Augusta Tabor really, after 1880, began to drift apart, pursuing two different kinds of lifestyles as mining millionaires. Augusta continued to live somewhat modestly in their mansion in Denver. Horace began taking up with a faster set. He took up residence at the Windsor Hotel, the finest hotel in Denver up to that point, where he began entertaining a series of mistresses.
Elizabeth Bondule McCourt was born in Oshkosh, Wisconsin in 1854. Her father was a successful businessman. He was a merchant, and he also ran several theaters. She grew up in a prosperous family.
She was the belle of the ball. She was also a little bit of a tomboy. She ran foot races against the boys and beat them. So she had a little bit of a reputation there as being a little bit wild, but she was very pretty. Unfortunately, in 1875, there was a huge fire in Wisconsin, burned down half the forest in the state, the family mansion, and the family business. At this point, Elizabeth realized she did not like being poor, so she wrangled a wedding with the banker's son, Harvey Doe.
And for a wedding present, his father decided to send them to Colorado to run his mines in Central City.
She got her name Baby Doe supposedly from the miners there because she was a very pretty young lady, a baby, and they called her Baby Doe because that was her last name.
Elizabeth Doe was, by the standards of the Victorian era, an extremely beautiful woman, somewhat round and plump, with very tight reddish blonde curls, huge blue eyes. She kind of got that image of an innocent fawn, a baby doe. And that was the name that stuck with her through the rest of her life.
She was very attractive, but she knew it. She was ambitious and wanted the extravagant lifestyle.
Flamboyant, very outgoing, liked the finer things in life.
But fortunes did not favor Harvey Doe. The rich mines that he began working on very quickly petered out. Elizabeth herself actually began working in the mines as a miner in order to make ends meet.
She worked topside at the mine. She never went down in the mine. If she had, all the miners would have packed up and gone somewhere else.
And the strain of their decline very quickly estranged Harvey and Elizabeth Doe. Both of them by 1879, although they were still married, were having affairs with other people. And by 1879, 1880s, the Does divorced. She was a flirt. She was fairly open about sexual relations. And when things fell apart with Harvey Doe, she very quickly took up with a number of lovers who saw the advantages of her beauty and having a beautiful companion by their side. Baby Doe gained the reputation as a gold digger, that she was trying to sleep her way up. And whether or not that's true, sometime by about 1879 or 1880, she attracted the attention of the richest silver king in Colorado.
One night at dinner, she was introduced to this fine gentleman by the name of Horace Tabor. They had dinner. She originally went there to ask him for a loan, but very quickly that relationship became a love affair. I don't think she ever had to pay back the $5,000.
The age difference was rather extreme. It was about 25 years difference.
Baby Doe was 26 and Horace Tabor was 51 when they met. For more perspective, Horace Tabor's son was a year older than Baby Doe.
So there was a catwalk from the Opera House to the Clarendon Hotel that was next door. It was said that they would visit each other via the catwalk. Horace and Lizzie's relationship was one of great love. She adored him as he adored her.
In those days, gentlemen will often keep ladies on the side, and wives sometimes look the other way, and Augusta may very well have looked the other way. She didn't want a divorce.
By about 1880, Horace had put Baby Doe up in a suite at the Windsor Hotel, a fabulous hotel suite that reflected on her status as the mistress of the richest man in Colorado.
She would put up with his poor hygiene habits. It was fairly well known that Mr. Tabor took a bath once every 2 years. He had an odor about him, I understand. She tolerated his poor hygiene. But when the story got out, it had two major effects. Number one, it made Augusta very sad. She had one meeting with Baby Doe. She was going to confront her or something, but when she saw this lovely woman, she was somewhat cowed. They had a very short conversation, and she left realizing that she could not compete. The second effect, it destroyed his political career. The backlash from the affair was horrendous.
By 1880 and 1881, Horace and Augusta Tabor were so estranged that Horace no longer wanted to be with Augusta. He would rather be with the incomparable Baby Doe. In about 1881, Horace secretly arranged for a divorce from Augusta. He didn't notify her of the divorce, but went to a court in Durango and got the court to issue divorce papers. And amazingly, Augusta contested the divorce. She wrote him a long letter and said, "We have spent so many years together. We have toiled together and sacrificed together, and we have always been partners, and I don't understand why you would want to give up on the successful relationship that we've built over these many years." But ultimately, a divorce was granted. When Augusta was asked to sign the divorce papers, she signed them and then wrote underneath, "Not willingly."
At the time of the divorce, Tabor was worth over $9 million. Unfortunately, Colorado law at that time had no provisions for alimony or spousal support. She got two buildings, the Tabor mansion that she was already living in and the La Vida apartments, and she started making money from this. She started a school for girls at one end of the mansion and took in boarders at the other end of the mansion. When she made enough money, she reinvested that in the brand new Singer sewing machine company and made a fortune.
And Horace took advantage of his posting in Washington, D.C. to pull out all the stops in a lavish wedding for Baby Doe. He bought her as a wedding gift a $75,000 diamond necklace. He paid for a lavish silk wedding gown.
He got married March 1st, 1883 at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. He had sent out silver engraved invitations to everybody to come to the wedding.
And United States senators and congressmen, and even President Chester Arthur came to the ceremony, although not their wives.
The wives of those prominent people say, no, I will not go there. Because remember, we're speaking of a framework where for a woman with major economic ambitions, the marriage to the successful man, that's the job, that's the profession. And a younger woman who threatens that way of making a living, of being a respectable woman married to a man of high achievement and significant resources. And so that women have to be very disapproving of this older man walking away from his wife who had stuck with him through the tough times and taking up with this beautiful young thing. And it's just made for gossip.
And what's always been interesting to me with him knowing the damage that was being caused, that he continued with the relationship but actually married her. It wasn't just, a trophy wife.
Came back to Denver, built a house up on Capitol Hill on Sherman Avenue. The entire block was this one house. Had 3 carriages, a very plain black carriage for Mr. Tabor, a big Cinderella gilded Marie Antoinette carriage for Baby Doe to go around town in, and a small pony cart for the 2 girls that were born to them. Elizabeth Lily Tabor was born 9 months after the ceremony, and 5 years later along came Rosemary Echo Silver Dollar Tabor. She didn't like all of those first names. A lot of people called her Rose, but she liked to be called Silver Dollar.
They were very, very extravagant. They had naked statues in the yard. The neighbors did not like the naked statues, so they made them drape them. Their 2 daughters had diamond-studded diaper pins.
Baby Doe and Horace Tabor did not flee visibility. This is what you do, that you become rich, and one of the ways that you make that unmistakable is you dress your wife up, and you build a big mansion, and you have peacocks. Those are particularly good because they're particularly loud, and rich people sometimes rethink the peacocks, I think, because they're in the morning. So, but you experiment with peacocks, and then there surely must be a quieter, expensive bird that we could have. That is a pretty solid record of high performance of that couple in the sport of conspicuous consumption.
Horace made roughly $10,000 a day. He spent almost as much every day. Today, that's still insane. By today's numbers, he was making roughly $2 million a day.
In 1883, I think it was Harper's Magazine said that if Horace continues to spend the way he is spending, he'll be poor as a pauper within 5 years.
Horace's reputation suffered from his affair and then marriage to Baby Doe Tabor and his abandonment of Augusta. And Denver society, who really admired Augusta, turned against Horace and Baby Doe and ostracized them in many ways. But because Horace was the richest silver king in Colorado, he and Baby Doe were able to successfully thumb their noses at Denver society and do the things that they wanted to do. They shrugged off the slings and arrows of social judgment. The Tabors were nationally known as celebrities because of their lavish lifestyle.
Society never really accepted Baby Doe, and so she didn't accept them. She would just flaunt her wealth in their faces. They would have $10,000 a night parties at the Dream House.
The town of Leadville thought of Baby Doe as sort of a woman of loose morals, and the other women in town were jealous of her beauty. So her reputation in Leadville and Denver wasn't very upstanding, but they continued to spend lavishly and live the lifestyle as if, these mines are never going to dry up.
Well, it stopped suddenly, and it only took 6 years to totally bankrupt the guy.
In 1893, the federal government repealed the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, ending the practice of artificially subsidizing silver since the 1870s. As soon as this happened, the price of silver plummeted.
It spelled the beginning of the end for Horace Tabor. Tabor was in his 60s by this point. He invested in riskier operations. He was unable to support the edifice of debt that he had created. Augusta and Horace's son Maxie chose not to tie himself to his father's sinking ship, and so became more separated and distanced from his father. His debt grew higher and higher. And by 1896, the Tabors lost their home. They came to turn off the power. And Baby Doe took her 2 children and pretended that they were the servants living in the house. They went down to the community pump and pumped water. They told stories by candlelight. She did everything she could to keep up their spirits and suggest that this was only temporary.
And one of his friends owed him a favor and put him in the position as postmaster of Denver. But they went from living in the extravagant to barely renting a room.
Say what you will about Baby Doe and her motivations to connect herself to Horace Tabor's fortune. They were a truly loving couple, perhaps even unreasonably so. Baby Doe was in her early 40s when they lost their fortune, and there were other wealthy men in Denver who would have been more than happy to invite Baby Doe into their beds, but she refused them.
Horace died of appendicitis on April 10, 1899, in Denver. Baby Doe was still a very young, vibrant woman with 2 young daughters. And she wanted to continue working the matchless mine because it is said that Horace told her on his deathbed to hold on to the matchless.
The legend, we don't really believe it. Last 7 days of his life, with the poisons from the burst appendix in his body before it killed him, he was in a coma. And he had sold the mineral rights of the matchless to W.S. Stratton of Cripple Creek 4 years earlier for $15,000. When Horace died, it had a dramatic effect on Baby Doe's mental prowess, I guess you would call it. And she became odder and odder the longer that she lived without him. She came up here and started living like a hermit.
Lily Tabor was 5 years older than her younger sister Silver. They dealt with the collapse of the Tabor fortune in different ways. Lily, by 1901, had decided to move away from her mother altogether. And in later years, Lily denied that Baby Doe was even her mother. Silver stuck it out for a little while, living with her mother Baby Doe in Leadville, but getting in trouble just like her mother, kicking it up with men of questionable backgrounds, drinking too much, and ultimately Silver moved away as well. She ended up in Chicago and became a burlesque dancer and a kept woman, and died under suspicious circumstances, scalded to death in a tenement in Chicago in 1925.
It's really only the last couple years of her life that she spent in the cabin because she really had no other place to go.
There was a grocer on Harrison Avenue when Baby Doe was living up at the Matchless. She would come down, her feet wrapped in burlap bags to protect her from the snow and the ice and everything. And she'd come down and write an IOU to this grocer. And he would take the IOUs, knowing that she would never be able to repay it, even though she fully intended to. So the people of Leadville, they loved Baby Doe after everything was all said and done. To help her, they would take things up to the mattress and just leave them on the doorstep and then leave.
She was absolutely penniless. And very often people would see her on the streets of Denver along 17th Street in the business district, soliciting what she called investments in the matchless mine. What she really needed was a handout. She kept a diary, she kept a journal, and she would write about how little food she was eating, about her malnutrition. One story goes that she was cut off from Leadville's city water supply and so was drinking water out of the flooded matchless mine. And as Colorado declined in the 1920s and 30s during the Great Depression, Baby Doe Tabor seemed to be this physical manifestation of the decline of Colorado from this silver era into rougher and more hardscrabble times.
She wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and struggled and struggled and struggled and did everything a human soul could do to try to think, what happened to me on this planet? And how can I make sense of it? And what are these visitations that come to me in the dark of night? And that's where it gets totally interesting.
And it was hard to tell where the dream world ended and the waking world began. She left hundreds and hundreds, more than 2,000 pages of what she called her dreams and visions. There's just a depth of internal turmoil, fears for her daughters, laments for her lost husband.
We don't know what happened to her mind. We know that if external stress brings breakdowns, she certainly had plenty of that. She had extreme social scorn addressed to her in the time of prosperity. I have seldom seen anyone better supplied with reasons to go crazy. There she is living in an environment where the earth has been pulled up, stirred around, and all kinds of chemicals have been brought into play, and lead can change the brain chemistry, and so we can throw that in. But I also think that those writings really convey an individuality. Just the way she uses her evocative words and tries to find patterns in her experience, in her dreams, and to make those patterns evident in these little scraps of paper.
Very devoted Catholic woman. I think she lived the rest of her life out there in penance for being the other woman. She was in her 80s. I don't think she went mad. I think she was probably delusional because of what she was eating and what she was drinking.
In 1935, when she passed away, she technically had a heart attack. It was during a blizzard, and a neighbor found her, noticed that there wasn't any smoke coming out of the chimney, and came to check on her, and she found her frozen body, and that's all over the papers, Denver papers, national papers.
When she died without a will, the state of Colorado became the executor of her estate. 5 nuns down in Denver came forward with the fact that they had stored a bunch of chests, trunks, and boxes for her in a warehouse down in Denver for years. There were 17 pieces in all. First chest full of old newspaper clippings. Second chest, old magazines. Another small box was full of children's toys. But the fourth chest had the remains of the wedding dress in it. Another box had a complete silver tea set in it.
It's an American story in a way because they came out here to make money, hoping to strike it rich in a new land.
What could we learn from the Tabors? Not to be so extravagant and think that it will never end, and be prepared for anything.
Perseverance, maybe optimism, certainly from Augusta, hard work. From Horace and Elizabeth, we should be more careful with investments. The legacy is the history of the U.S. from the 1830s to the 1930s.
People become famous for reasons that are sometimes quite mysterious. There's value in asking, why are they famous? And more important, the fact that we fixate on them tells us something about ourselves. What are we saying about our own curious minds and souls?
And that life is full of love and success and failure and disappointment and betrayal and joy, and that the Tabors at various periods in their lives together represented all of these. I guess it tells us that we all need to live our lives on our own terms, that we need to be comfortable with the choices we make and accept the consequences of the decisions that take us to good times or bad times. But through it all, what remains constant is love and devotion. Because let's not forget, Horace and Augusta loved each other deeply for 20 years. And Horace and Baby Doe shared that same kind of devotion with each other. If nothing else, the saga of Horace and Augusta and Baby Doe Tabor remind us of the love that we share with the people who are important to us.